Android apps, if you're writing a native Android app, basically your only choice is Java. I'm not talking about Java though, I'm going to talk about Kotlin. Which is a different programming language that builds to the JVM and is more exciting looking than Java, which is boring. Okay, that's the preamble.
Not being boring is the best.
So, the basic kind of for people who are a little bit plugged into the mobile-y stuff, if you've heard of Apple's Swift, which is their newer, updated, or replacement for Objective-C, which is their old, boring programming language for iOS apps. Kotlin is at a similar level to Swift as Java and Objective-C are in a level somewhere, kind of together.
Boring level.
I know. That's the one. Oh, this is going to be awful. Okay, so, the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of talk about what the app does. Where are you going? I'll be out the door. To play around with a bunch of different technologies, one of them being Kotlin, and the rest we'll talk about as it comes up. I built this stupid little Reddit app because Reddit has the benefit of being simple, but just complex enough that it's not just like a calculator that tells me that 5 plus 5 is 13. So it's complicated, but not that complicated. And also it's fun. So this is where I am. I don't know why the emulator is, well, I mean, I know. Android's emulator is balls, and so that's why this is crap. But just picture it as a phone, and it's good. So basically the app looks like this. This is just from the front page of Reddit. I've got a little picture up here, it's got a title, it's got the subreddit it's from. You can kind of scroll through. Some of them don't have pictures. Very exciting, modern Android-y look. And then the other thing I am working on, but I'm not done yet, because, this is not done by the way, is if I want to read it like this way I can, but the other plan with it is I can read it also a little bit more like this, where when I'm finished, I just kind of like throw these off to the side, and then like the new ones kind of get there. Yeah. And then when I get down to the bottom, wherever the hell the bottom is, it does the not exciting anymore, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, because it's technically a feature. Hang on, bottom, and then I got that little loading, and it's gone now because it didn't finish scrolls. And that's true whether I scrub to the bottom or get the stupid thing done. Anyway, I can also move it this way, which does nothing, but it's fun. Yeah, so anyway, so that's, and then when I click on a stupid thing, I've got this little inbuilt, I'm really glad that nothing is too not safe for work on the front page of Reddit, because that sometimes happens. When I click on a stupid thing, do I click? Am I clicking? It freezes and dies. Anyway, there it goes.
There you go.
I've got this little inbuilt browser. There's like 4 different ways to do that these days. One of them is like a little web view, which is what I've got here. In newer versions of Android, they have their Chrome, what do they call them? Custom tabs or something, which is basically you can embed a Chrome window in your apps so that works exactly like Chrome, but it's under your app's process so that you don't have all this other stuff, and back works as better than normal, but still back is, anyway. Or you can just have it click and it opens up the app, like the web app or the YouTube app or the Imager app. I've had all 3 in this app so far in the like 2 weeks I worked on it, but this is the one that I've got on my master branch right now. I'm not sure what I really want to do with it because they all have weird advantages and disadvantages. Like this one is kind of garbagey and things don't work great, but it has kind of its own history that's the history of things you've looked at in your app, whereas if you have like the Chrome tab or go out to the main browser, then you have this situation where the things you tapped on in the app suddenly end up over here in your like normal history. They populate all your stuff and it's fine. So I'll figure that out later. I'll probably just make it a setting and pass the buck off to the user. Anyway, so that's the whole app. That's all it does. there are things I want it to do, but we haven't gotten there yet. So, the kind of main exciting parts of this one are not actually the app, it's the other stuff. Like the Kotlin and the tech. So I'm going to talk about that because this isn't a Reddit workshop. Oh, and this is all up on, is it up on GitHub? I think it's all up on GitHub. I think. It's probably all up on GitHub. So, basically the gist right off the bat is that, well, no, actually I'll start here. In my build.gradle, which if you're familiar with Android development in the recenter time period is not a weird thing to find in a project. Basically how the Kotlin stuff works, and this is kind of its primary advantage over other things that work with the JVM that you could theoretically build Android apps out of, is that Kotlin is a language that was built by the JetBrains people, who are the people behind IntelliJ, which is the technology behind Android Studio, which is Google's current offering of things that you should build Android apps with. It's their like Xcode IDE competitor to Apple's stuff. So it's relatively inbuilt with the whole toolchain that exists right now. So in order to do Kotlin development for your Android app, you put this thing here in your Gradle, and then you say, I want my Kotlin Android plugin. At this point, you're done, and now if you have Kotlin files in and amongst your Java files, they just get built in with the rest of it, and the Java files don't even know that Kotlin is there. It all just kind of links together in the class files. If I'm talking over anyone's head, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to stop. Other than that, I've got a bunch of other dependencies down here because I'm just using a whole bunch of fun libraries that I'm working in, some of which are actually Android system stuff, and you have to put them in as a dependency because, I mean, it makes sense. Oh, and I also got this thing, because Gradle by default has a bunch of things for building and installing on devices, and like nothing for actually running, which seems stupid. So I built this. It just runs a shell script that just runs my app. So I just do Gradle run instead of like Gradle install, and that does all the building, and then I like touch with my finger to start it. It just seems stupid. Anyway, actually it does two things. Even Android Studio doesn't do this. You do this one, and then it sends a key event, which is the wake up now key, which means that if your screen is off when you hit the run, it turns your screen on before running the app. Because even Android Studio, if you click the stupid play button, it runs the app in like behind the blackness of your locked screen. It's really dumb. I don't know. Anyway, so
Feature.
right, but like I made a better feature where it works for me. So the main actual code here. Huh? I know. It's still Java based. Anyway, so there's all sorts of stupid words. So this part is familiar for anyone who's worked in Java. They haven't changed that part.
There's no semicolons.
Right, but that is unfamiliar.
I'm afraid.
So here's my. How do I know where my lines end? Yeah. So this is where I declare my package and import basically everything a good app needs. But now we get into the part where we actually like write some code. So for people who are unfamiliar with Java or maybe even Objective-C, this will maybe go like, yeah, this is a programming language. Why is this exciting? But for the people who aren't familiar with Java, this is probably going to look cool. It's not even that great.
It's so cool, Christopher.
I know. So here I have a class called Hello Activity. I'm defining in my Kotlin file that is a subclass of activity.
What are the parens?
I'm getting to the parens, goddammit. So this activity over here isn't some magic new ecosystem. This is just like the same Java activity class that exists in Java. It's just that I can subclass it kind of transparently because the language was built, unlike Scala or Clojure or some of the other ones.
French.
Sure. That are trying to that happen to run on the JVM, but they're really trying to be a completely different language. What Kotlin's really trying to do is be a nicer and more friendly and compatible language to Java, but it's still got the same sort of lineage and history. It's not trying to rock the boat too much and be a completely different paradigm. It's just trying to be a nicer language to work in, a little more terse and friendly. Anyway. So this is the same Java activity I've always got. The parens here mean that this has kind of an implicit constructor that is just the open paren, close paren version of activity. So now I don't have to go have a constructor, it's just hello activity is this parens, and then we'll move on with our lives. You'll see a little bit more interesting uses of that later, but that's basically it. Here I've got variable, because I'm using var here. That means that my entry's recycler view value can change later. This one down here is a val, which means it cannot. So I know now that the listing object itself can change, but I can't say anywhere else self.listing equals some other value. I just am guaranteed that that's not the case. Oh shit. Yeah, that's faster than I expected. Anyway, so I can declare my variables in here. I can even initialize them up here, even if it involves code.
What does late in it mean?
Late in it means, trust me, I'll get to this. I can't actually build it in an initializer yet because in Android, your view doesn't exist until onCreate, which is an Android lifecycle method and not the class's initializer. So I'm saying, trust me, trust me, trust me. There will be a recycler view, but I can't technically have one for you like right now. But like, trust me, it'll be here when you need it, which is, a lie sometimes. But in this case, it happens to be true. Here we've got an override keyword. Unlike with Java where it's optional, with Kotlin it's necessary. So if I define a function with the same name without specifying override, Kotlin will tell me, no, that's already a method that exists. You have to tell me that you're overriding it because I don't want you to accidentally stumble upon an existing method name. And if I say override and I get the type wrong or something, it tells no, that is not a method. You are not overriding it. You should probably figure out what you're trying to do because this is a bug. I'm never going to call this method. So that's kind of nice. We've got a common among modern fancy languages question mark over here, which describes that this is a nullable value, whereas Java has nulls as any value except integers. And with Kotlin, it's the case that I'm saying here that this saved instance state may exist, but it may not. And if I want to use this saved instance state, then I should handle that. Kotlin has, or Swift has a similar thing. Yeah.
For overloading a function, you also use override, or is it different keyword?
No. For overloading, you do not use. There's no keyword there. You just have two different things that are the same name. Which is a little, because like they're just considered different functions, so there's less looking up on that one. Other than that, I'm running out of time actually, so I'm just going to keep kind of chugging through it. Where am I? One of the nice things here is that a lot of Java has a lot of boilerplate. It's got a lot more words than it needs to have, I would say. And Kotlin tries to do away with that, again, in a way that's compatible with Java's wordsiness, but without making it hard on the programmer to go type them all in. So this here, for example, that my cursor is on, look at that. This one. This is kind of an anonymous Lambda function that I'm passing into this subscribe function here. The equivalent Java looks something along the lines of swipe, callback.get item hidden, method.subscribe, and then this gets passed a new thing subscriber, whatever that thing's called, and I put one of these in here, and that's a paren, and that's a semicolon. Oops, shit. It's a semicolon, and then like I have an override in here, and then this is a method called void like do on subscribe or something, and then that takes in nothing, and then that goes in, and then it's like, okay, logic goes here, which is like a ton of stuff, and it's better than how it used to be before Java had their anonymous subclasses, where I would actually have to go make a file over there somewhere and make a subclass of this stupid thing that had my logic in it.
2 lines of code.
And I'd have to go pass all the state that I wanted in just so that I could have like, okay, print it. And then I come out and then I construct one of those and I import it and then I put the instance in here. So like this is better in Java, but Kotlin is a little bit more sensible. in that they just allow me to put this curly brace over here. They realize I'm making a lambda. They're like, great, this is supposed to be a class. I know what class it's supposed to be because there's only one of them. The class only has one method in it. So I'm just going to like put that all together, and then I just have to say, okay, I'm subscribing, and this is what I do when I get there. Kotlin's closures are also actually closures, whereas Java's are dirty lies. In Java, the closures, it looks like a closure if you're using like instance variables or if you're using final variables. But if you're not, it just is like, oh no, that's a compiler error. I don't know what that is. So like, it's right there. And they're like, right, but you have to tell me it's final so that I know that you're not changing it, because really I'm just going to copy it and put it over there. And if it ever changes, you're in trouble. Whereas Kotlin, you can actually like use your variables. It's cool. I actually lied earlier. This method does take an argument. This might be considered a misfeature depending on who you are. If you only have a single variable in your function, they give you this it variable so that you can use, rather than having a thing that looked like, I don't even remember the syntax right now. The E goes to, no, it's this arrow, I think. And then putting E in here. It's fine, but the it is just a little easier. And the it actually, I'm almost abusing it in this case because the it's really there so I can do like a list dot filter filter by it is greater than 5. Which again in Java would be like 6 lines. It's ridiculous. I mean, they wouldn't have written it, but if they had written it, it would have been 6 lines. So that's kind of cool. Other than that, like I see the pizza over there, I'm kind of wanted to eat it. So I'm going to go really quick through my things here. I'm going to take a break, actually. Yeah. Can we do that? Intermission?
Yeah. Totally.
Let's do it. Everyone go eat pizza now.
So the pizza's on the table. There's plates on the side.
Look, it's all very exciting to everyone, not just me. That's what I heard somebody say. Delete it. Okay. So I've got this Kotlin stuff which goes in and makes a lot of the stuff easier. This is my main kind of activity that I showed you. It doesn't do a lot, but it does a lot. Because I'm still not 100% sure how to organize code that I've written this way, both in Kotlin, but more because I'm using a bunch of RX stuff, which I sometimes have talked about with other presentations of mine, but not in Java. No, not in Java. Which means that I've got this kind of evented subscription-y toolkit that I'm using, which is great, and I really like its ability to process streams and events, and that part's really awesome. But something I haven't quite figured out how I want to structure my code with it is the fact that kind of by design, it puts a lot of my logic in lambdas and callbacks, which are all individually very small and neat. But on a macro scale, it basically puts all of my logic in the view class that I created it in, because that's where I string up all my events, and then I've got all these little lambdas, which are individually very nice, but as a result, I end up with one big file with all my logic in it. And I haven't quite decided how I feel about that yet. I mean, I've decided, but I haven't decided which part of it I'm going to fix. So this file ends up being kind of long, but all of it is really nice. Just trust me on that, it's great.
It looks so pretty.
I know, right? One of the other things that Kotlin allows, kind of picking up right where I left off, is, again, like Swift, because a lot of the things that Swift does, Kotlin does, and vice versa. If you don't know either of them, you don't care about that comparison, but it's cool. So Java really comes from the history of loving getters and setters, which is great, but no modern language does that. So this, for example, again in Java, you tend to have like callback.get items stashed, and that would be a method, and then you might do something on that over here, and then you would like set items stash over here. Great, great, great. Anyway, that seems kind of unnecessary by modern standards because we change a lot in like 10 years. So basically what Kotlin does, both internally and in the way that it interacts with Java, is it looks for things that look like get blank and set blank with like one parameter here and no parameters here, and it goes, oh, I get it. You have a property called blank. That's what you're actually trying to do here. So this, for example, this item stashed method here is actually translated in the Java side to swipe callback.get item stashed dot subscribe. And I can do, similarly, I can do swipe callback dot item stashed equals, if I can type thing without having to do a setter. And I can kind of nest those, so I can do like thing dot thing dot thing dot thing equals thing, and it'll like get set. And it also allows me to do things a little bit more like this, where I can do like, you know, plus equals and stuff, because it realizes that I'm doing a getter, then I'm modifying it, then I'm doing a setter to kind of come back to the thing. So those are kind of great. Again, just in terms of kind of cutting down some of the length and redundancy of Java's stuff. They don't have a new keyword because they're like, look, it's the name of the class. You can't name anything else the name of the class. Just call it, and then we get data. This is a lambda down here with the syntax. This is the sort of thing I should probably put in a real method and not just a lambda inside my like viewDidLoad method. I'm still working on that one. Where the hell am I going? Okay. So this down here is where we get back into the typing, because again, Java, or being built on the JVM, Kotlin has types, which are great if they're used nicely, and otherwise they're terrible. Java falls a little bit closer to the terrible side. Not all the time, it has advantages, but a lot of the time the advantages are I have to say a bunch of stuff. So you may have noticed that up here, I have this old last, which is my get item count -1. All I have to do, though, is say that this is a variable, and it knows that get item count returns an integer. It knows that when I subtract 1 from an integer, I get an integer, so it knows that old last is an integer. I don't have to tell it that old last is an integer. It is one. Anything else would be an error. Similarly, I do that up here, where again, if I wanted to do something like this in Java, again, I would have to be like listing equals listing. With a new and then a semicolon, and it's like, okay, so I'm going to make a variable called listing that's a listing, and the value of it is listing. But I know that it's right here. The type is right there. The only thing, unless I'm doing like something crazy, the only thing that goes in there is a damn listing. So again, in Kotlin, it has this type inference where it just says, okay, yeah, it's a listing. This variable is of type listing because it's a listing. I can see that. Like Swift, though, the type inference in Kotlin is not as powerful as something like Haskell's. That is to say that the type inference only goes on the line that it's on. So it knows that this is a listing because right there I built it as a listing, right? Down here I used an integer on that line, so it's an integer. What I can't do is something like val thing equals nothing. I don't actually remember what Kotlin's nothing is called. It's probably nil. Actually, I think it is. It's no. And then later down here, I'm like, thing is magically an int now. And have it be like, oh, well, way down here you used it as an int, so up there it must have been, it doesn't do that. It just is like, no, okay, no, now you need to tell me, because on the line where you defined it, I don't know what it is. But surprisingly, that still cuts down on most of the use cases. And in fact, when I start getting down here, I start running into even fewer situations where, again, this logic down here in Java, because of the way that the casting works in Java, I would have like, okay, so I've got text view, title view equals view.find view by ID, r.id.title, but then that's now a type error, so I've got to put text view over here, and then like, it's just like, okay, so I've now like set it in a bunch of different places on this line. Whereas in the Kotlin stuff, it can be like title view, I cast it over here one time and then we're done. I don't have to repeat myself 6 times. Which is, again, one of those just surprisingly nice things. This here, where I've used the subscribe method here and up here and over here, this is when we start getting into the RX Java stuff. which is another library that I'm playing with in this, and has nothing to do with Kotlin except that it gets even better. Again, basically, rather than having a whole bunch of either methods that have references to each other or callbacks all over the place, or different delegates that or interfaces that I'm one of these and I subscribe as one of those and do all this stuff. The RX framework has a whole a subscribable stream of things, and when something happens, you do something to that stream. I'm barely even using it to the same potential that I did during the game that, if you've been here before, you might have seen me talk about over in JavaScript, where I'm using a lot more of the RX features. But what's interesting about this is I actually finally got to test the claim that RX makes, where the library is very similar depending on which language you're in, or between languages. I was actually super impressed with the way the RX JS and the RX Java, which I'm using from Kotlin, bindings were very similar. A lot of the methods that I'd grown accustomed to, and the sort of way that they tended to work basically transitioned over directly, and it was actually pretty seamless, being like, okay, well, I know that I was using this toolkit in this way over here. How do I do that over here? And it was basically just changing some words around, and the whole thing kind of worked out, which was super happy. So basically, in my thing here, what I can do is, well, I've just got this item hidden callback here, and this is my thing where I swipe, and the item goes away. And so rather than kind of hooking up listeners and delegates and all this stuff to kind of go all the way down the event stack and back up, instead I was able to just build this subscribable object and say, okay, just tell me when something gets hidden. You go process it, and when something gets hidden, let me know. And then this just goes here, and it says, okay, I'm going to remove the item at the index that just got removed, and I'm going to notify this, and I don't have to thread my state all the way down with all these on-click handlers and, set item, did show things, simple listeners, and Java all over the place. I can just kind of say up here, tell me when something changes, and then I can handle it, which allows me to keep my logic up here, even though all of the business logic lives somewhere else. And I've got the same thing for when I tap on an item. I just go to the activity. When an item gets stashed, which is the one that goes to the left and does nothing, do nothing. Just say it got changed, which means reload it. And then this one down here is what I used to do the endless scrolling. So I've got in my listing, I've got this subscription to my list of diffs, basically. And what happens is, when I get down to the loading item, I've got some logic down here, which is a little gross, but also kind of cool, which says, when I'm building my view holder, which is the items in my collection view, if my view holder is of type loading view holder, which in Java would have sucked, but in this case it's great, this when is thing is another Kotlinism. That's surprisingly cool, because it's basically kind of an if check combined with a cast, like a safe downcast. So this holder that comes in up here is by the library that I'm using, which is an Android library, recyclerview.viewholder, because this just gets called with this is a subclass of this thing, and it gets called with my view holder, and it says, please put the data in here. But I have two different kinds of views. I have the views with the items in them, and I have the views that says loading and a little spinner, and they're completely different. They have different things in them that you populate them with different data. So basically what I've got here is I say, okay, when I'm doing some sort of a switch on steroids that says when the holder is of type loading view holder, I can put arbitrary expressions in here. In this case, is an expression that returns true if it's this type. But the compiler is smart enough to know that if I get through that if statement, it's because I know something about the type now that I didn't know before. Specifically, I know that this holder type is a loading view holder. So now I can go into my loading view holder, which I'm actually not doing here, and I can use methods on holder as though we're a loading view holder, because that's now a thing that I know. I've both checked that that's the case and kind of implicitly subclassed or downcasted my holder into this type that I have. which means that I don't have to go around and be like, if this is this, if this is of instance of type this, then I make a new variable where I cast it. It looks kind of sketchy, but trust me, it's cool. In this case, the compiler knows it's cool, and it's just kind of letting me do it. And I'm doing that more here, where I'm saying if this is an entry view holder, then down here I can just say, okay, give me the title view, and give me the subreddit view, and give me the body view. And it knows that that's safe because it knows that I've checked, because otherwise I couldn't have gotten to this logic if these properties didn't exist on it, which is, again, it just kind of cuts down on all the garbage. But basically, whenever I'm loading a loading view holder, I know, okay, I've reached the bottom of my list, I should probably do something in this. So I take my loading signal, I send, okay, go do the loading now. It goes out and does the network request, which I'm using retrofit for, but it looks like I'm not going to have time to talk about that because I've been talking for so long. And then basically that goes through the whole logic and comes back with my diff here saying, okay, these are the items that were added, this is where they were added, these are the ones that moved. And then I can use that to kind of plug into my Android list and say, okay, Android list, you do your fancy thing because I've removed these ones, I've added these ones have shifted like this, and it can do its whole like animated, pushy, all the stuff. Yeah, so I'm going to wrap up because it feels like I've been talking forever and there's still way more code than expected there to be. So kind of, but anyway, what I'm going to say is a couple things. Kotlin, I've been pretty happy with it. I haven't really run into any problems where I felt that the language was holding me back. There were things with Android that are a little crap, but they always were. I mean, there are things with everything that's a little crap. That's the philosophy of the day. But there's never a point where I felt that the language was getting in my way, really, which was nice, because Java is constantly in my way. I felt that the interop kind of made its promise. The RX stuff worked pretty seamlessly and made me really happy. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that the Android stuff in general, in this kind of like, material design, lollipop-y sort of Android world, I feel is sort of reaching the point that a lot of people have always assumed that a lot of mobile frameworks were at, which is where there are a lot of interactions and stuff that Google talks about in the material design guidelines, and like all of their apps do it. And in general, you can kind of just do all of it without it being too hard. Whereas, doing the sort of like touch ripply event handlers and like the cards that lift up when you touch on them and like the slide side to side stuff that all of Google's stuff does. Getting your apps to do it is basically like, well, I put this one line in my view, so now it ripples when I touch on it. Or like now, I put this other line in my view, so now the cards lift up when I touch on them, and getting the thing that like goes side to side and does my own custom animation when I swipe it off the screen was basically like, oh yeah, I go instantiate this class and then it's done now. Which I was actually really impressed with because a lot of the stuff on like iOS, for example, or even Android before recently, there were things that like, there are still things where iOS's built-in system apps, do all these different interactions and people are like, oh cool, how do I get it so like when the keyboard comes up, like my list view does this? And it's like, well, you write it from scratch. Like the system just doesn't do that. It's not a thing it does. It's like, what? But like every app does it. And I'm like, right. Some of them pulled in a library. A lot of them wrote it from scratch. That's just not something the tool does, which is insanity. Whereas I was actually really happy in this modern materially interaction world that when I was looking for like, okay, which library should I use to like handle the list that swipes and animates all of my cards up, the answer was like, well, Google already has one. You just like use it. I was like, wow, that's novel. What a concept. Building the toolkit that your own apps use into the other people's library, and then like your own guidelines do what your own tools can do, rather than just making shit up as you go like Apple does.
Gives them better control.
Yeah. I mean, like, everyone sucks all the time, but it's getting better, which I was actually sort of impressed about. Those are kind of my takeaways. If anyone has any questions about whatever the hell I've been rambling about, you can ask me.
Chris.
Yeah. Question? Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, can you scroll to where you did the description of the when it is on the side?
Yeah, I can. I mean, there's a couple of those.
Well, the one that you were showing.
Let's find out. Oh, that was down here.
On the holder, yeah. So aren't
Here,
you,
yeah.
aren't you tightly coupling your base class to its subclasses there? I'm wondering
Am I
why
tightly
you wouldn't
coupling-
subclass and then have the common text at the bottom be the common implementation in the base class, do the custom and then call base. And that would be a much cleaner design that would decouple the base classes from the subclasses instead of coupling.
Roughly.
So what was your thinking in not doing it that way?
My thinking in not doing it that way is that I mean the passing off answers, I don't like it.
So you don't like white.
With subclasses, I find that there are definitely some things that are where subclassing is nice and does help to sort of reduce complexity and duplication. So if I had maybe an entry that was a different kind of entry. I don't know. I'm floundering here, but basically, there are certain times where I like subclassing, and I find that it does reduce complexity and stuff. In situations such as this, I find a lot of the time that people factor out similarities that happen to exist over similarities that are actually conceptually similar. So in this case in particular, both entries have a label with words in it, but other than that, they're completely different. The loading text doesn't get pulled from an entry; it gets pulled from. It's a constant string in my configuration, like in my translation files.
Okay.
It doesn't, like, I could put a picture in there and hide it, but at this point I have a subclass where I've just hidden all of the things that exist except for one, because there happened to be a label in both of them. And then I would have a spinner that's like maybe in the other one and it's hidden, or maybe it's not. So I could, but in this case they share basically no logic. They are distinct things in my mind. There are certainly cases where I do use subclasses and it's fine. But in this particular case, my view holder really is just a thing with stuff in it.
But isn't from folder.titleView.text equals title down, isn't that all common?
No. My loading view holder handler stops here. This is all of it. This part down here.
Oh, I'm misreading the breaks. At the,
Yeah.
5, 6 lines.
Oh, yeah. No, this part is all my entry view holder. My loading view holder has basically no logic whatsoever. Yes, if all of this logic had been duplicated between the two entries, then I'd probably agree with you. But in this case, they're basically only sharing a superclass of view holder because that's what the library needs them to have. But other than that, they don't really have anything in common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to elaborate on
Yep.
that pattern is pretty typical with all the modern UI languages in iOS. You have this fact of having to deal with subclasses and pre-existing classes. So when you're trying to deal with handling dispatching, you end up with this pattern where I have to get back to my concrete base, concrete derived class in order to handle the line differently. Without when it goes through some visitor pattern to go dispatch it back out to that thing and come back here. Just to say, okay, I want to handle my custom little thing here differently in this context. It's just a lot easier to drop down.
Well, why wouldn't you just declare the method as abstract in the base class? And then
Because
get
you don't
the
have control of the base
implementation.
class.
I'm sorry?
In this
You
case,
don't have control of the base class, it's in the system.
in this case, yes. In this case, the recycler view holder
And you
is
can't
a
wrap it.
system provided class that the recycler view requires. So I could make a next level down abstract class that is the same thing with one method and then base my things off of that. But in that case, my library is still giving me something that I then need to know is mine, and then I can do other stuff on that. So it's not to say that that's never the right solution, but in this case, it would be, I think, overkill. Maybe as time goes on, I might find some way to integrate that. But yeah.
As you may infer, I've never worked on a phone. But I learned something, so thank you.
Yeah. Were there other questions? I don't even remember where I left off. Yeah.
Have you used Scala and can you compare them?
No, I mean I've seen Scala code with my eyes, and I may have even made edits to it, but I have never built a Scala from the ground up.
Right. Okay. It looks and feels very similar because I work in Scala code. But I find that Scala compiler gets in my way all the time. So I'm surprised to hear that you say that it seems to have very much the same features in terms of type inference and that sort of jazz.
Yeah.
Scala has much more powerful type inference, but still not what we want. More than this, but still not.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. Yeah.
Okay. I think the biggest difference here that you've identified both times I've seen you talk about Kotlin is that Kotlin has the really tight Gradle integration, whereas if you're building a Scala project, you're probably going to be using SPT or some unholy magic.
Well, yeah, and again, because the IntelliJ guys are the ones who wrote it, if you're doing a not Christopher sort of project, and you're using Android Studio, then again, it's even easier. You like click the Android Studio plugin button, and you click the Kotlin button, and now they add all the Kotlin plugins to your Gradle file for you. The editor gains Kotlin awareness, so if you're in a Java file and you click like find me the definition of this method, it can go to the Kotlin file and show you over here. You can debug through it. It really. If you're using Android Studio and that's what you want to do, it really does seem to integrate seamlessly with the Java code you already had. And like I was saying during the food eating portion, Swift has the same sort of property, but the other nice thing with this is that you can, because the integration is sort of tight and transparent, you can take one file that you're writing now in your large gargantuan app and be like, okay, but like this view I'm going to try writing in Kotlin, and you like go in and you write it and it seems to go pretty well, or you're like, okay, and then maybe you'll do more later, maybe the legacy stuff will stay in Java the whole time, but like the rest of the system doesn't care because the Java thought it was Java and the Kotlin thought it was Kotlin, and there wasn't really a lot of issue in between. Or you can go write a library in Kotlin that does a lot of like looping and functional sort of Scala stuff. In terms of like filter the list, fold map or something, if you were doing some crazy algorithm where that was a real good idea. And then like your Java code can call that and it doesn't know that you wrote it nicely. It thinks it was terrible. Without having to kind of go all in. And potentially, if your app is big enough and your company's subdivided enough, your coworkers might not know that you wrote it in Kotlin. Because like they hit the build button and it kept working. Do you have a question?
Yeah, just curious. You worked with both Swift and Kotlin.
Yeah.
So would you say that Kotlin does any better or worse than Swift in terms of getting stuck into some decisions because it's forced on by the JVM?
I would say that Kotlin has an easier time of it, just because Objective-C is a very non-typical language to begin with. So even in Swift, despite the fact that the syntax is really nice, you can still end with an object where you're like this dot set on type where, and then like you've got a value here, and then like thing other thing. And as much as Swift is trying to be in the like modern language space, you still have to be able to call Objective-C methods, which are these ridiculous monsters. I mean, like, they're super cool, I like them, but they look weird in this context. They're verbose, and there are positives and negatives to that. So Swift, a lot of the time, even though it's a really nice, tight language, it still has to deal with a lot more with Objective-C's bonkers history. Whereas Java, with its relatively rigorous getters and setters, you're able to make it look a lot more like your Rubies and Pythons and JavaScripts in terms of this, just this thing, and like no one writes a method that's 10 capitals long. There's no reason why it has to be that way, but Objective-C's, it tends to. Other than that, I think Kotlin has a number of features I haven't talked about, and even a bunch of them I haven't used yet, but I know that they're out there. To sort of help the programmer to write their own smooth transitions away from Java's very verbose past. So an example that I brought up when I first saw Kotlin, that I've brought up a couple times since to other people, is there's a sort of a pattern both in iOS but even more in Java where you excuse me, where you might have a thing where you're like, this is a DB transaction and it's a DBT and it's like, equals, oops, that's my delete key, new BD transaction dot thing, and then like you create one of those and you ddbt dot insert and you do a bunch of stuff over here and you do that thing like, dbt dot commit, but then you're like, oh, well, like what if there was a thing? So you put your try in here and then you put this in your finally block, and then you put that over here, and then over here you've got your catch, and and then you close the transaction, but you don't commit, and all this sort of. That definitely does not go in there. That goes over here. I already almost made an error, and so you end up with this sort of like this rigorous process, which is all great, and it's great, but it's not great. Whereas Kotlin has ways of kind of turning the syntax back around so that you can go make a helper method that injects itself into the class, for example, and you can basically do like transaction dot do, and you go like insert delete, and you've written this do method, and this do method itself inside it has a try block and an end block, and then these bits of logic get inserted into the try block, and then they get ended up with a commit, and then there's like the catches, and then there's the finally that closes. But I've taken all of that away. I put that in a little helper method over here. All I have to do is be like transaction.do, and I put these lines, and I can trust now that I can't fuck it up, because if any of the words collide, I've already got my catch, and it closes it makes sure that the transaction is closed, or the cursor, or whatever I'm working with. But if I do get to the end, then it's committed, like all of these things. But I can wrap that in the language and write myself an easier way to do it without having to like do it every single time and potentially miss an important one.
I've done that in VBA.
Yeah.
Isn't that the first thing you do is you just define a data layer that would have your transaction block.
Yeah. No,
Right?
and
Pass in the
that's it's not a brand new thing, but it's new to Java, and so I think Kotlin, because it's specifically trying to be more tight, and Java in general is a little bit more verbose, not on a single line but between lines. Kotlin has a couple more features specifically for trying to root out some of that redundancy and ceremony that Java has that Kotlin's trying to get rid of. Whether or not that works out,
Chris, so it sounds like a lot of these frameworks are trying to solve problems of Java on a longer timeline. And recognize you don't have a crystal ball.
I don't.
What may be a progression of this? Is this an evolution of Java as a platform, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know exactly what I would prefer. A lot of app stuff, so there are things like these reactive libraries. People are talking about reactive sorts of frameworks these days. I think they're cool. I think that they do help solve problems. The subscription and transformation model tends to cover a lot of use cases. So building those sorts of frameworks are good, and I think that could be a direction that the industry goes. Whether or not it is or not, remains to be seen. But the difference is, though, is that like as a framework, you can get pretty far. You don't necessarily need the Android system's buy-in to do a lot of the stuff. In the same way that Kotlin can get pretty far without having to change fundamentally how things are. They can just go take some of the pain points and kind of sand them down. A lot of the modern languages are moving towards kind of the more functional parameter passing, filtering values as well. and those are also great. But a lot of libraries like Swift and Kotlin and stuff provide those without having to throw out everything that there is and kind of move on. So it's possible that there will be something, just over the horizon that just, shakes everything up and everything changes. But I think that Kotlin and Swift aren't. I don't feel like Kotlin and Swift are a stopgap to sort of stem Java's bleeding. I think that they are a convenience, but they don't have to be more to be more convenient. Like, I don't think we need to change everything that there is. We've just noticed, like, we do this a lot, and we probably should have a better way of doing it. And I think the frameworks and the flexibility that they bring kind of get us most of the way there. And in fact, a whole system that was, ground up, functional, and reactive mobile apps thing has its own drawbacks. Like, so I don't feel like this is the first step towards a fundamental change. I think it's just another step down a convenient path. But I mean, I'm crystal ball-less, but yeah.
You've probably lost 20% of the blather.
Yeah, Java has a lot of that.
Yeah, so you're constantly typing in the same type name twice on a line.
Yeah.
Those compiler, why the hell do I have to type it twice?
Yeah.
If I cast it on the left side, it should know what on the right side.
Yeah.
That's
Figure
why
it the hell
you
out.
text editors that magically autocomplete nonsense.
Yeah.
Then you're relying on the
Obviously, it's
editor
gonna
to
make
insert the
compiler
crap.
do it. You just
Yeah.
do it in your text editor.
The problem is the one that's easiest to get away is the one you have to type first.
Yeah.
What's,
Were there any other questions? Because I've been talking for like a long time. Someone else should present. Okay.